Excited to have you with us here today on the Anatomy of a Winning Sales Tech Stack and our panel. My name is Jeff McKittrick. I'm the Vice President of Sales Excellence at WalkMe, where I lead sales enablement, our sales methodology, and making our salespeople be as effective as they can be when they're in front of our customers and updating our value to all of our customers. I'm joined by three great panelists that I'm going to let introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Brian Burns, and we'll get kicked off shortly.
Hi, I'm Brian Burns. I'm the host of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast, career enterprise salesperson for about 25, 30 years. And now I train salespeople online all day long, and sales is my passion. So I'm looking forward to talking it over.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Linda, would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Sure. I'm Linda Page. I'm the VP of Global Field Enablement at Splunk. That means I'm responsible for basically our field-facing roles and helping them be successful and ramp quickly and do things like sales kickoff and continuous learning. So excited to be here along with the two Brians, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you. And Brian from Accenture, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Brian Baruman. I'm a managing director with Accenture, where I've spent the last 17 years helping our clients navigate their challenges around CRM investments with a specialty in B2B sales transformation. I've spent a lot of time in the ecosystem with many different software vendors, and I'm really excited to be here today. So thanks for having me, and look forward to having a good dialogue.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. Well, let's jump right in. We've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to go with the first question here. Obviously, massive shift for all of our sales teams back starting in March. Lots of lockdowns, travel restrictions, lots of horrible things going on around this pandemic, but has definitely changed around the behavior, and the go-to-market is everybody became a virtual seller or an inside salesperson. That obviously has implications for our teams and for the clients, for our sellers themselves, and then the technology and some of the shifts for that. So I'd love to hear from each of you. What did we see in the shifts? Were companies well prepared for this, or where were the stumbling blocks? Have people changed out the technology of where they're going? Interested in your thoughts. And obviously we're moving into 2021, probably won't be a change here for at least the first half of the year. So what you're seeing for trends, and maybe what some companies are going to continue to do to adapt maybe for the future. Brian, with Accenture, maybe just from your client's perspective, since you get to see this across many different companies.
Yeah, as you stated, it was quite a dramatic shift, particularly for those field sellers who are used to being engaged in person with their customers and with their sales teams, quite frankly. And so, conferencing technology was obviously the hit of the pandemic, and what brought some of that virtualness to be more face-to-face like. But I think where we saw technology play a role outside of the traditional video conferencing applications was really rethinking how we enable our sellers in a digital fashion. I think in many ways we've been trying to get our clients to adopt digital and ride that transformation in a different way. Everything from AI enabling a seller to be more intelligent about how they approach a meeting, to how I'm engaging on an actual conversation in real time, giving me tips and information, some things that we saw happen in B2C, like sentiment analysis during a conversation. We're seeing some of that come to light within our B2B sellers. And ultimately, I don't think things are going to change right away. And in fact, there's a lot of studies out there that'll show you that some folks are actually enjoying this. Not everybody, but a lot of the buyers around B2B organizations are saying they're comfortable with this remote selling interaction. And I think I even saw a study that showed 15% of B2B decision makers are willing to make a $1 million purchase online. So if that's the sentiment that we're seeing from the buyers, certainly the behaviors of the sellers need to change in the technology that we enable them with. And I think there'll be no shortage of technology. It's going to be a question of what do I get return out of, and what's actually worth it. So that's some of the stuff that I saw over the last several months, and some of the things that I foresee us, to expect as we head into the rest of this year.
Wow. Well, that's great, Brian. Yeah, 7-figure deals over virtual. Would you ever imagine we'd be doing those?
Never.
Linda, how about for you from the Splunk perspective, as adjusting your sales teams with all of that, and what kind of changes have you made to help make your sellers, to make sure they're still effective?
Right. Well, I think the question is, I don't think anybody could have anticipated or been quote unquote ready for this, right? But what it has allowed us to do, in our case, we had a lot of technology that we were either in the process of rolling out or already had, right? So, what that, in the past, you could kind of debate whether you should be using that for internal enablement or not, or they might have an in-person option. At this point, adoption, there's no option there, right? So adoption is not the option, right? We have on the good news front, everybody has to adopt, and so that helps us in many cases. And so we've seen great adoption and engagement with the technology. So that's a positive sign. I think the challenge externally for individuals who are trying to, there's also all the external engagement with customers, and so whether it be something like Zoom or other technologies, or LinkedIn, those types of things which we had in our tech stack. Now everyone is using it. So I think the challenge for the seller is differentiation, right? So it's not just how do I use these technologies? I'm going to adopt them. I am using this, and we'll use them to enable internally. But when I'm dealing with customers, I have to show up slightly differently or a little bit more uniquely. So that's where we quickly shifted from, okay, we're using it. Now where it's like, how do we use it to the best of our ability and make ourselves differentiated in the process?
Brian Burns, how about for you? Since you talk to sellers all day, across companies, how are they feeling? What kind of behaviors? What's their feedback on this shift?
Well, I think it's a key distinction, because we think just because we can do it online that we can hire a less experienced person. I think we have to do just the opposite. It's harder and harder to keep engagement, to get access to executives, to differentiate what Linda said. And how do you build a conversation that continues throughout the deal? Because now we're competing against doing nothing. That's the default. That's our competition. It's not who we think of in the Gartner quadrants. It's doing nothing. That's the default. So we have to sell why now, not just why us or why change. And to do that takes a lot more talent. Because you don't have that dedicated face-to-face time, that 60 minutes in a boardroom anymore. You've got to grab their attention. You got to become good at texting, finding cell phone numbers, being able to interrupt people without annoying them, which is a talent. And so if you stick with the standard cadence, you're not really differentiating yourself. So sellers are having a hard time now. And the managers are having a hard time determining how well they're doing at it.
Linda, I know you're mentioning that you're coming up on your SKO. It will be a little bit later in February or early March as you're planning. Can you share with the group a little bit about what you're thinking about making it, with this virtual format for the first time? What are you thinking about making it impactful, and what are some of the things you're considering that might help our audience?
Sure, I'm happy to. Maybe Brian Burns can tell me if I'm thinking about it the right way. But I think the first thing is we can't lift and shift a traditional sales kickoff. So I think the first thing is just changing people's perspective around what sales kickoff is. It's always a tendency for many people to try to put everything into a sales kickoff anyway. I think that now that we're virtual, you can't have the same length of a program. What we're looking at is breaking it out into actually a multi-week program with shorter bursts, and so that we can be much more engaging in that approach, and then people can actually apply offline. We have just had to get really intentional on what is at the heart of what a sales kickoff has to accomplish versus maybe some offline options versus what we might do in reinforcement post sales kickoff. So some of the things that we're tossing around once again is doing twice a day so that we can have global interaction. We don't want to have anyone in the company anywhere in the world not engaging in the discussion. So we've kind of split that out and doing things like 2-a-days, short 1.5 hour, 2-hour bursts, simulations, using a lot of simulation technology. I think peer-to-peer connection. So, all the things that I think we hear a lot from our sellers is that they really are craving actual interaction. They're not on the road. They're not being able to talk to people. So we're looking at how do we get them, whether it's something super simple, in a breakout in something like Zoom, or something more complicated like a simulation to get them engaged and working together and feeling at least like they're able to connect, which is such a big part of a sales kickoff, is that connection point, and setting the tone for the year. So and then we're experimenting with things like how do you give fun and excitement offline, globally, virtual catering, all kinds of fun elements, which is a big part of that as well. So that's not even a technology question, but it's just a way to make people feel a little bit special and connected. Maybe something personal that comes to them, those types of things. So it's a whole new ballgame for sure. We're pretty excited about it, though. I think we've got some really kind of unique ways that we're now challenging ourselves to go out and have a conversation in a different way.
Oh, thanks, Linda. Hey, Brian, how about you? As what inspires the AEs, the sellers, and what are you kind of hearing for what would make it? And I think you've got a few of these sales kickoffs under your belt in your career as well.
Yeah, I've got pretty much January and February booked, and pretty much everybody's looking for the same thing. They want something that's both entertaining, informational, engaging, and something that they can walk away with, that they feel like they learned something, that they're a little bit better, some war stories, but more about, where are their deals getting stuck? How do they prevent that and make it interactive? Because no one wants to sit and just listen to one person talk for an hour. That's just not going to fly. Lots of Q&A, lots of case study based, and just discussion, and much more short form, pretty much what Linda described, so that they can consume it multiple times throughout the year. And it turns much more into enablement than it is the traditional sales kickoff entertainment or motivational speech.
That's some great insight, Brian. In fact, we're evaluating and setting up our sales kickoff for here in February. What we're looking at is the highest rated sessions, even as we were doing these in person over the past few years. The team's given me a lot of great data, is customer win stories. And one of the nice things of a virtual format is, whereas normally you would have had to fly customers to your event, now you can bring a lot of customers in, right? So we're actually looking at quickly chopping up and having 10-minute win stories where it's in the customer's voice. Here's what the sales team did well. Here's where they had to go and do their own internal selling to prove the value. How did they justify the investment in WalkMe? What were the particular use cases? So we're really pivoting exactly like Linda, like you were saying. 90 minutes is about all we're going to get for attention. Globally set them so that they're in time zones, so multiple runs of that, so that you're in time zones for people that are comfortable with them, and even putting customers from their time zone in with them, right? So international customers presenting to international audiences and America's customers there, but really prioritizing getting where our customers getting value, where did the big deals go down, what did we lessons learned, what was the demo that won the deal, et cetera. So we're really excited about that. So it's to the team, another question that we've got is, do you have a picture of your ideal tech stack? And probably inside of that, what's the tool that you just can't seem to do without? And then, if you've got that ideal tool or that tech stack, how are you measuring the performance? How are you justifying the existence of that tool? So, Linda, I'd like to start with you as you're thinking about your role and what you're doing for enabling the teams there at Splunk.
That's a hard one to pick one, but I'll just say my ideal tech stack has to include something that is going to drive productivity for our sellers and our leaders in particular. I think the leaders are the point of leverage. So anything that helps make their jobs easier, particularly in a world with remote coaching, remote development, all of those things, that's very much top of mind for us. So one of the things, I guess, if I have to pick one that I can't live without, it's something that allows coaching, engagement, communication for our leaders to be able to work more directly with their team, since they can't do that in person. So that would be, we definitely are looking to utilize our coaching platform in a much more proactive way through everything from onboarding to every activity that we do. In terms of measurement, I think I don't know that the measurements changed, but we do have lots of urgency around it. I think the newest one, which we have to get creative about, is measuring engagement in a virtual environment. So, we want, obviously, the productivity metrics, getting people up and running quickly, all the things that we want to, impacting revenue. But right now, employees are such an important part of, how we can be successful, and keeping great people at the company it's important. So measuring engagement around everything we do and every activity that we roll out is a super important metric for us. And it's a little tricky, right? It's not as, it can be squishy. So that's a newer one that we're exploring.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, lots of challenges in that area. Brian with Accenture, would you give us any thoughts you've got here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough question. I'll echo Linda's perspective. It's a good answer. It's hard to answer because I think there's so many components to an ideal tech stack. But I'll think about it, maybe a little bit differently and a little bit conceptually. I think there's the core CRM, which is really the data, right? And I think for the most part, those are pretty consistent regardless of which technology path you want to go. But I think the engagement layer is really where we see the CRM applications tend to differentiate, and we see Salesforce.com quite often as kind of the leader in that engagement layer, both internally with sales organizations, but also with customers. And then I think you have this other ecosystem of capabilities that can either plug into Salesforce or really enable the sales reps to do their job in a better, more efficient way. And really that landscape is endless. And I think the challenge that most of our clients face is how do you pick the right one? I love what Linda said earlier, that there are a lot of things that overlap, and getting very crisp and clear on what's most important is where you make those investments. But I do think it's a combination of sort of best in class, core CRM and engagement, and then an ecosystem of players around there. And ultimately, I think the thing that we'll find our clients can't live without as it becomes more pervasive are things like AI, automation, and analytics. And that kind of feeds the last point, which is how are we measuring the performance of our sales organizations? Ultimately, it's about the number and quota attainment. But there are literally dozens of different KPIs that you can use to show progress there. And I think the key thing that we need to have our clients understand is you need to be able to see those KPIs as they're happening so that you can make your adjustments to have a chance of actually impacting the final outcome, which is sales. So having those dashboards, those visualizations and things that really help you make decisions quickly, I think is crucial. So that's kind of how I would think about it for folks.
Lastly, I want to just open up for the team here. There is a lot of financial buyers, they're now able to participate. There's a lot of justification of sales tech stacks, et cetera. I'm going to leave kind of open for the panelists here. If you want to give us kind of some closing thoughts, we're quickly up against our 20 minutes. If there's things that you see, what's something new, what's something innovative maybe that you're seeing companies invest in here? Brian, with Accenture, you gave us a couple of ideas, more data sets, but anything else that you guys want to leave us with a thought on, something that maybe the audience should be thinking about? I haven't thought about that, maybe looking into something there. Let's go, Brian with Accenture. Anything here for us?
Yeah, I think, the big takeaway, I think, is to kind of get back to the brilliant basics and use this opportunity to sort of re-baseline your vision for where you want to take your seller experience, and more importantly, what is the buying experience? I think very often we look at the sales process and we're very introspective in terms of what works for us. Take a moment to understand what it looks like as a buyer. Where and how do I want to engage with a company, whether it be digital channels, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's over video, and understanding sort of the moments that matter across that customer journey and that buying journey, I think will give you a new lens into where you should make your investments. Because while there may be 50 steps in an end-to-end sales process, there are probably 4 or 5 that matter the most to a buyer. And those are the ones where you probably want to prioritize your investments and think about how technology, with Accenture, of course, there's my commercial, would actually help you get there faster, no pun intended. But I do think that's a different lens that often we forget about. So that would be my takeaway for folks as we head into 21 for hopefully a prosperous and a better year for everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Linda, any thoughts, even just where you're thinking about taking your sales tech stack, some of your next investments, things you're seeing as for your sellers and your productivity?
Well, I think just a couple of quick ones. First of all, I don't think anyone's tech stack right now has to look the same, right? We all have to be really crystal clear on what will provide the most value to our customers and our constituents. And so I think there's a tendency, at least in my world, for people to prescribe technology to solve for problems. A lot of the technology, there's overlapping, functionality and things of that nature. So we're just trying to get really clear on what's going to provide the most value, and how do we realize value with the systems we have. So we have lots of things. I think the one thing we haven't talked a lot about is enablement at the point of need. And in this particular world, the more we can do at the point of need in real time, for someone, probably the better than long trainings and those types of things. So I think that is a place where we have, things like WalkMe and other things, right, that are just really about just-in-time support. And that's a big part of what we're thinking as well. But I guess I would just encourage people to be really crystal clear on what you need and don't try to emulate someone else's tech stack, because I think we all have different challenges, different things that's going to be, the biggest return for each of us.
That's some great guidance, Linda. Thank you. Brian Burns, thoughts from the AE's perspective or just other things you're seeing to kind of bring us home?
Yeah, I think from an AE perspective, you got to assume that your competitor is to not do it now. So you're competing against their attention, their focus, not just their money. Most of your customers have plenty of money. We've got near zero interest rates. Money's cheap, time's expensive. So you have to sell why now. And it can't be just a proposal. When you put the ROI together, compare it against not doing anything. How much is that time costing you? Putting it off 90 days, 120 days, whatever. That's why they have to take action now. And that's when you get that great conversation with a CFO or a C-level executive. And that's what I'm helping reps with right now, because once they can sell that and compare it against waiting, because everyone thinks waiting doesn't cost anything, but waiting can be the most expensive thing out there. So I think we all have to assume that the objection that we're going to get is not now, and how to beat that objection.
Thank you, Brian. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian, Linda, and Brian. It was great spending 20 minutes with you. Loved all the insights you were able to give us. And we're looking forward to Q&A here with the audience. And thanks, everybody, for joining.